Boom. What's up, everybody? Jensen Cummings here. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. This is Best Served Podcast 162 Wild West Wines with Juliann Adams of Vines 79 Wine Bar in Palisade, Colorado. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much for having us. This is a real thrill.
All right, we're talking Best Served Chill. This is our channel where we focus on beverage producers and professionals. A producer, a winemaker is Juliann. We're going to talk a little bit about winemaking. We're going to talk about owning a winery. We're going to talk a little bit about the region out on the western slope of Colorado. So tell everybody, Juliann, Vines 79, what's the winery all about? What can they expect if somebody were to have your wine or to come visit you?
So our winery is one of the only Western Colorado cowboy themed barns in the Western Slope. So
Hence Wild West Wines. I love it.
Hence the Wild West Wines. I was in tourism and hospitality for many years and heard and talked to visitors about why they come to Colorado, and their perception is still the Old West. It's John Wayne, it's cowboys. So I said, that's our brand. That's got to be it. And it's great. We have real cowhide on the bar, and people love it when they come in.
All right. I like it. I think that's, no matter what it is, owning your brand, who you are, what you represent, and having that be clear at every touch point, I think is such an important thing. As there's more and more white noise, there's more and more competition. The quality of Colorado wines is accelerating at a rapid pace. And so I think it's an important thing to recognize that people want to feel a sense of place, especially when they come out there, I think is important. So take us back. You mentioned you were in tourism. What was the work that you were doing? And then get us to the point where, like, what's the catalyst to say, I'm going to go and be an owner of a winery and a winemaker?
So I was in hospitality. There's a hotel called a Wine Country Inn in Palisade. It was a brand new hotel. They were building it from the ground up. I got involved in it right from the beginning, helped them set it up, got it started. And because it was one of the first true wine themed hotels in the area, there was a lot of work to be done, and we needed that relationship building with all the local wineries. So I became very close friends with all the wineries, the winemakers, the owners, and I've been an amateur winemaker for several years. And so it was always kind of fun to talk the talk, and got my hands on some grapes from some very good vineyards in the Palisade area, and just kept doing it. And it got to be an expensive hobby. And we started entering a lot of competitions. People were encouraging us, saying, you guys are not just your typical home brewers. You guys have a knack. There's something about your wine. So we did. We started putting it in competitions, and we won all kinds of awards. We have about over 40 awards from our amateur status. And so we made the leap. We said, all right, let's just do this. And so we did. And in 2018, we finally got our permit from the TTB. So we were able to have our first vintage of our own. And of course, it took a while to get everything else ready as far as the sales room and the winery. So we were not open until this year.
Is there a pretty active scene when it comes to the amateur, kind of the home winemaker? We know that there's a massive scene when it comes to home brewing in Colorado, clearly, and craft beer is kind of out there. You don't hear about, wine clubs and things as much, or homebrew wine clubs. Is it a pretty active scene?
Exactly. It is an active scene, but it's a quiet scene. They really haven't gotten together, and that was one of the things I thought we would try to do, and it just never really got together because I think the home winemakers tend to be a little more protective of their brew, where I think the beer brewers, the brewmasters, they kind of want to share their stuff.
But they want anybody who will drink it. Be like, please drink this. Please drink this. Yeah,
exactly. But I think the home wine brewers just tend to be a little bit more protective of their brand. So but they're active. There's over 100 of them here in Colorado. We hold an amateur wine contest through the wine festival that we do every September, and there's over 100 entries, and it's always amazed me that they're all out there, but they just like I said, they aren't visible.
What were a couple of the wines that were kind of award winning that I'm guessing then became flagship wines for you when you got into the professional side?
Yes, so our Cab Franc, the Syrah, a Tempranillo, they were the ones that really were our flagship, and our dessert wine were the ones that were most popular. So when we planted our vineyard in 2013, we went towards the grapes that we were the most proud of, and those were the Cab Franc, the Syrah, and the Cabernet Sauvignon. and they've done really well. That's one thing about this Palisade area, is this area has an incredible microclimate that the grapes just love. So we have hot days, tons of sunshine, but then everything cools off in the nighttime, and that's what brings on all that extra sugar, and our wines just have a different character.
I want to talk about the grapes a little bit later because I think there's a lot to talk about there.
Okay.
Making the jump, right? I have a lot more experience on seeing people go from home brewing to craft beer professional. It's not the same. The recipes don't scale the same. The equipment is different. All of that. Was it a struggle? How did you kind of go about starting a professional winery? Because it is a big leap.
It is a big leap. And, I think the best advice that you can give anybody who's thinking of doing it, going from an amateur status to a commercial status, is do a lot of homework. Yeah. Take classes whenever you can, go to seminars, go to conferences, just start talking to people on that commercial level. Because it is very different. All the chemistry is different. The volumes are different. The tanks are bigger. You're dealing with just so much. The numbers are bigger. So I really think that is one of the best things of advice, is that do your homework.
Do a lot of homework.
I'm
interested. Are there opportunities, maybe even at your winery, for kind of interning, where somebody can go and kind of get close to the source and see the process? I know people will invite you in for kind of crush because they need a lot of people power. Yet you don't always see kind of the winemaking process per se. Are you open to that? Is it an open community? Because you mentioned they're a little more guarded. Where again, we talked about homebrewers are like anybody and everybody who's willing to let them taste their beer. They're like, absolutely. Right. Is it a little bit more guarded on the professional side as well?
I'm not fighting that. I think that once we get into that professional level, everybody's willing to help each other, especially in this community. Which that's another thing that I think was a plus for us, was we were already existing with relationships with all the local winemakers and the owners. So they were more than happy to help us out. I had a ton of questions, and I would sit there with a pad and ask questions, and they would just throw out the answers. And, and there was always that last comment that they would say, "Are you sure you want to do this?" But it was just, there's a romance about owning your own vineyard and your own winery. Absolutely. But you have to go in it with your eyes open. It's a lot of work as well. There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of responsibility. You are responsible to make that wine, and you're responsible to make sure it's going to be good, because you want people to like it and, eventually buy it. And it starts with the vineyard. I'm a firm believer that good wine comes from good grapes. And the good grapes come from good vines. And so you have to baby those vines to begin with, which is why we wanted to have control over that aspect of it. There are many winemakers out there and winery owners that buy their grapes from other growers, which is great. We need a resource for that, but we wanted to have a little more control of that, so we planted our own grapes.
So let's talk about the grapes now. I want to set the tone for people because I think this is interesting. You have set a style, a sense of place for your brand. It's very clear when they come, they're going to have a rootin' tootin' good time, and they're going to drink some good wine, and they're going to have the cowhide, and they're going to have that experience. I think that's a very important thing. Yes. Yeah. Now, when it comes to, you think of appellations, you think of growing regions. One of the things that, having spent quite a bit of time with winemakers on the Western Slope and across Colorado, is I'm always thinking about what is the experience, but also what is the juice and thereby the grape that's going to create a sense of place. And Cab Franc, you mentioned, I think grows better here than many other places I've been in the country and in the world. And there's a little bit of a white space. There isn't regionality outside of France that really owns Cab Franc, right? Nobody in California is the Cab Franc area. You have Pinots from Russian River or from Willamette Valley in Oregon. They own that space, so it's hard to compete. Cab Franc, I'm very interested. On the white side, Riesling and Viognier are two white grape varietals I'm very interested in. So have you seen that, being able to say, Cab Franc, we own that. That's us. That's Colorado. And this is our expression of that. Have you seen value in that? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of people in this area that think that Riesling and Viognier especially are the king whites for our area. And they do extremely well. Riesling, I think, does a little bit better in the in the West Elks region than it does in ours. But I think Viognier does really well in the Grand Valley. On the other side, like you had just mentioned, Cab Franc, I think Cab Franc is our go-to wine. And I would love to see Colorado as a state grasp that real estate and say, that's our grape. Because Cabernet Franc here is totally unique. It's got such a bold character. It's got some black fruit and it's got some earthiness to it, but it's totally unique to Colorado. It's what's growing here. And so I would love to see us grab Cabernet Franc and say, that's us. You know, when you want a good Cabernet Franc, come to Colorado.
I am a believer in that. And I think it's interesting, Cab Franc, maybe from the restaurant side, you know, Cab Franc has always been kind of a blending, right? It was Cab Sauv first, then there was some Cab Franc because it gave you more earthiness. You have that classic green bell pepper. And actually in restaurants, you know, green bell pepper gets love or hate. There's a lot of love or hate in the green bell pepper, some of the pithiness and some of that. I want to let people know this is more like roasted bell pepper. I always feel like Cab Franc feels very roasted. It feels very rich in hot days, as you mentioned, ton of sun in Colorado. There's a little bit more of that blistered sense of a bell pepper, which I think cuts across like raw green bell pepper, which is the assumption that a lot of us in the restaurant have always had with Cab Franc, which makes it nice for blending, but not as a 100% varietal. So I want to like set the tone there for you. Your specific vineyard, how much Cab Franc have you planted?
You know, I have about 3/4 of an acre of Cab Franc. So I have a total of 2 acres total, which doesn't seem like an awful lot, but we have an incredible yield. So believe it or not, out of just the 2 acres last year, I had a little over 10 ton.
Wow. That is serious yield.
It's serious yield.
How much then, do the math for us then, how many cases are you producing of Cab Franc?
Of Cab Franc, I've got about, I'm trying to think really quickly. It's about 300.
Okay. Gotcha. Cool. So just an idea. That's still very boutique, very, very small.
We are very much a boutique winery. We
Absolutely. And then do you know roughly what your total production is?
It's about 800, between 800 and 1,000.
Okay. So a good percentage of your production is focused on the Cab Franc. I love it. I'm a really, really big believer in like own your real estate, whatever that space is, own your brand.
Absolutely.
And you're doing that multiple ways. Check on the brand side, check on the grape side with that. So,
you know, and I just had to mention that when you mentioned a little while ago about how Cabernet Franc in a restaurant scene is not the wine that you would see on a wine list or the one that you would actually choose, or even that the restaurant sommelier would even pair it with something. Yet it's surprising to me how many people that will come into the winery and when they find out there's a Cab Franc, they're all on top of it. And that's what they'll mention. They go, well, we always have Cab Franc, but it's always in a blend somewhere. It's never by itself. And Colorado Cab Franc is so good. And we just want Cab Franc. Yes. So, you know, it's kind of funny that you would mention that because it's not the one that you would go to. It's not what you choose firsthand, but Cab Franc is so cool and such a great wine here in Colorado.
And if you ever are a restaurant or a bar and you're speaking about, we represent Colorado in some way, it's farm to table, it's this or that, and you don't have, I'm just going to challenge you. If you do not have Cab Franc from Colorado on your wine list and you savvy yourself a Colorado focused concept in any way, you're missing the boat. Absolutely. It is 100% the grape of Colorado. And I think it's important for winemakers. I want to speak to winemakers too. Sometimes winemakers are really good at the wine and not so good at storytelling and sales, right? Sometimes they don't speak restaurant. And we absolutely know the 80-20 rule when it comes to consumption of alcohol and sales of alcohol. 80% of our sales come from off-premise. When you think of a liquor store, a wine shop, and 20% come on-premise, which is restaurants. Yet 80% of the focus when it comes to marketing and sales need to be on the restaurant side because that's how you build brand. Because they sell a bottle, somebody goes to their liquor store and says, hey, I had this amazing bottle of Colorado wine, Cab Franc, at this restaurant. Do you carry it? People usually aren't going to the restaurant saying, hey, at my liquor store, I always buy this wine. Do you have it? They're looking to the restaurant to kind of get them into something exciting, something new, something that's going to represent the experience that they have. rant, I know, but I want to make sure winemakers and restaurants, they have to coalesce in a more meaningful way. And
Yes.
Cab Franc, I think, is a huge, huge opportunity that is undervalued right now. Your sales dynamic, how much are you selling in liquor stores? How much are you selling on premise? I know COVID makes that a little more challenging. And
COVID
then
is
how much are
definitely
you
challenging.
selling specifically to restaurants?
You know, right now we haven't done any sales in a liquor store. And the reason being is that we just opened. And so I'm trying to keep my inventory a little bit close to home right now. So we haven't expanded to liquor stores yet. But that being said, I am in the local Palisade restaurant, the Palisade Cafe and Wine Bar, and the Wine Country Inn. So local restaurants. And I'm also at a couple, there's a couple wedding venues here in Palisade. And so when they do their weddings, it's our wine that's on the bar.
Smart. You have the tourism side. Like there's a lot of attention there. And then these people are traveling here and then they're going back to Denver or Colorado Springs or wherever. And then there starts to be a little bit of attention in larger markets. It's a smart way to smart. Very, very smart, Juliann. I like where your head's at a lot. So let's talk about your community out there. You know, tight-knit community of winemakers. I've met so many great people. It's always great people. The juice is good. The people are better, right? And the best people make the best juice. It's just linear. It always happens that way. So let's talk about Palisade. Why was it important for you to be there specifically making wine, you know, versus somewhere else?
Palisade has the vibe.
It does.
It does. Palisade has a vibe. And there's such a great collection of wineries here in a small community. I mean, we're not a very large community. We have the whole Palisade area is 7,500 people. So we're a very small community, and yet we have 29 wineries in this one small community. So that community, because we are such a small community, we all work with each other. We refer our customers to each other. We help each other if there's something that somebody needs, or there's a question, or if there's something in the vineyard that you're not quite sure what you're looking at, you can call someone else and they'll come down looking at you. And so we have that close knit industry. And so that's part of that vibe. And as I said, when I started with the hotel, and this has been, you know, over 15 years, that I've built this relationship with all the other winemakers and all the other owners, and they're friends. They're not my competition. They're my friends. And so when we were going to do this, I knew it had to be here. It wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the same passion for me. It wouldn't be the same industry for me if I did it somewhere else. It had to be in Palisade. It just spoke to us. It was part of our. It's our network, and it's all here.
There's two places every time I go to the Western Slope, dozen times or so that I've been out from Denver. Josh Nuremberg of Bin 707, who I think is the best chef and restaurateur in the country. And you all know that I know and travel all over and speak to people, just the philosophy, the approach, the leadership, the way they invest in human capital, the way they invest in their community, their food is amazing, all of those boxes. So that's number one. It's always the first place. And then have a great relationship against relationships with Cole Terrace, Teresa and Scott High Country Orchard, amazing fruit as well. So I always know I'm going to those two places. And then I actually stay very open. I just go and talk to the locals. It'll be the bartender or the cooks or the servers at the restaurant, or whoever's pouring, say at Cole Terrace, or somebody who's, you know, working the vines, and say, where do I got to go? And they always know and are so excited to tell you where to go. You got to check out this place. You got to go talk to Johnny over here and Susie over there. I'm like, yes, I really do. I need that. And so I'm fascinated in that. When somebody comes to you, you know, where are you sending them next?
As far as if they're drinking wine?
Of course. If they're drinking wine, where are you sending them?
So we're in the Vinelands area of Palisades. So we're on the eastern side. So for us, we try to make sure they have gone to all the wineries right here in our neighborhood. So Cole Terrace and Bookcliff and Sauvage Spectrum, and then us. And once they've done us, then I kind of want to see what kind of wines they're looking for. So if I know that they're really into what I've just poured for them, then I know they're gonna also enjoy if they go up the road and they go up to Mesa Park Vineyard. or they go to Hermosa, or they go to Talons. So, I try to find out what else they're looking for. What else are they looking for in their experience? Do they just want to chase wine, or are they they want to hang out in some really nice patio and overlook a terrace, or do they want to have a picnic? So, it's all about the experience. So you just don't want to just send them off anywhere blatantly. So I want to make sure that I'm going to take them and send them to some place that they actually going to have a good time and enjoy.
Your hospitality and tourism background is paying dividends.
Yeah. Yes,
absolutely.
It is.
You're thinking experiential because the value of them getting the full vibe of Palisade to then go and tell 47 other people, post on social media that then 2,000 people hear about it, that then you're creating commerce downstream from that one interaction. Very, very smart. I want winemakers, anybody in hospitality, listen to what we're talking about right now. This is how you build brand equity so that Palisade flourishes, so that your community flourishes, so that your winery, restaurant, brewery flourishes. I think it's very important. You mentioned Sauvage Spectrum, which I had not heard of. Tell us a little bit about that winery.
So Sauvage Spectrum, as I said, just opened right about the same time we did. And the owner, Kaibab Sauvage, has been in the vineyard management business for over 15 years. So he's very familiar with all the other winemakers. He knows what they're looking for as far as the grapes, because it's what he's selling is the grapes. And he has the last few years, he actually planted a few of the hybrids. So the cold hardy varieties.
Yes.
And the cold hardy varieties are a bit of a challenge for winemakers. They're not well known. People aren't they're not going to just go in and ask for a Chamberson or, I'm just trying to think of another kind of Nuray. They aren't familiar with those names. Never heard of it.
Right.
So there's a challenge to the winemaker. So the grapes, now he's trying to sell the grapes. The winemaker's not sure what to do with those grapes. So he was having a hard time finding market. So he decided to open up his own winery and really got into the winemaking. Okay, I'm gonna make wine, good wine, with these cold hardy varieties blended with some of the other different kinds of grapes, the varietals, and make a decent product, and then sell the product to the winemakers. So that was kind of how it started. But then he partnered with his winemaker is Patrick from he was with Carboy. And Patrick's been fabulous. And so he got into making sparkling wine. So that's his niche right now, is sparkling wines.
I'm a fan.
And he's done an amazing job with that. So it's just exciting to see starting on the vineyard side, and then how he's progressed into the winery side. And he's doing fabulous. And he's our neighbor. He's right behind us. And so we're very excited to have him here. And we work together. We've done a couple brunches together. We've trying to promote each other. So that's the fun part about it, is trying to come up with some good stuff to do.
I love that. It's so important to have that kind of, again, vibe. Great word, by the way, vibe. I think it creates just movement and energy. Mm-hmm. And if everybody is vibrating on the same frequency, you create a sense of place, which I think is really important. And Palisade, I think, has that. To some of the people that you mentioned, there is that vibe there. And I think the more people are aware of that, I think it's very important. I'm very fascinated on those new varietal styles. As we talked about, it's even hard to market Cab Franc with the challenge that you see but there's a lot of opportunity as you build trust and confidence in the consumer market, in the retail market as well. Then all of a sudden they say, what is the new avant-garde eccentric thing that you have? And that becomes a demand. So I'm fascinated in that as well. I love this too. You mentioned somebody else, and I want to bring up somebody on the education side, right? Because I think that's super important. So when you're thinking about the art versus science is really what I want to get to. Where do you fall in that range? And talk about that a little bit, kind of through the lens of Jeannie Eaton and the work that she's doing too.
So I probably fall into the 90-10, and I'm lean more towards the art than I do the science.
I would have guessed.
Yeah. So to me, it's all about the grape. I want to be true to the grape. You can manipulate a wine juice, a fermented juice, to the point where it's not even the same characteristics of that grape that you started with. Sure. And when you're picking grapes, you're tasting the grape, and you already know what you're going to get. And so I want to make sure that that's on the bottle when the person's actually opening that bottle and I want them to taste what I tasted in that grape.
Yes.
So I do. I don't manipulate the wine. I try to just let it do its own thing. And obviously there are times when you have to manipulate it to some point where something's not quite going as right as it should. But for the most part, I want it to do its own thing. But Jenny Baldwin Eaton is, she was the head winemaker at Plum Creek Winery for years and years and years and years. And the local college, Colorado Mesa University, had decided to enter into a enology and viticultural program. And they went to Jenny to have her run that program. And she's been incredibly valuable to that program. And that was when she started that 2 years ago. I saw it as an opportunity. It's like, okay, this is a great opportunity to learn the science part of it. So I did. I took the classes with her, and she's been fabulous. But there's a wealth of knowledge there. So at least if there is a problem or something comes up, you know what you're looking for. Because that's the worst thing, is if you find something and it's not quite right and you don't know what it is. Because if you don't know what it is, you can't fix it. And grapes and wine can go bad sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And there are
agricultural product. It's a living, breathing organism.
It's a living, breathing. It's a living thing, and you have to pay attention to it, and you have to listen to it. And it's just like a baby. And if you turn your back on it, it's going to go do something crazy. So I've
had some of those wines.
hopefully that you don't bottle that when it's bad. But Jenny's been instrumental in getting us that educational part, because I think education is important too as a winemaker, that you keep your eye on what's trending, what's coming in, what's like the grape. I mean, the Cabernet Franc is there the varietals. She's been doing a lot of testing with the cold hardy varieties into how early should you pick them? When is the best time to pick them? Right. What blends make a better wine? Because they are different. They're a little picky. They're finicky. So you don't just go out and pick them like you would because the Brix is 27. You go out and pick them. That's not, because they get. I find that cold hardy varieties tend to be they get a tendency, a very herbaceous tendency if you don't watch it.
Yep.
And so we have found in the program, that if you pick them earlier, you get more fruit and floral notes than you do. If you let it stay on that vine, there goes all that herbaceous stuff, and that's not what you want.
I love this. I think we lost all of the wine drinkers.
We probably
all the winemakers right now are like, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. And that's the fascinating thing about it. I can just see the wheels spinning for you if you're like the artist, and then making sure that Jenny's, in your mind going,
she's in my mind.
Here's the science, here's the technical part, and balancing that equation, I think is very important. And usually you see some of the best wines come from wineries, winemakers that have either within themselves or within their team kind of that balance, counterbalance. I know last minute, I know this is a family affair, so we would be remiss if we did not mention you getting the opportunity and the challenge, I'm sure, sometimes working with family. Kind of let's end with that. Talk about the family for just a moment.
It's a family project. It's my husband, Dan, and my son, Zachary. Zach is a full-time paramedic and fireman in town. So, he does that full time. And then when we need him in the winery, he's there. And I just want to mention that in October, when we had that early freeze, I had a lot of the firemen that were off duty come and help us pick the Cabernet Sauvignon off the vines, because we had that freeze coming. And so
you can always count on them.
You can always count on them. Yes. They came to the rescue. So it's a family affair. And again, there's challenges, because sometimes we don't see eye to eye about, especially maybe the marketing side or the sales side, or whether or not we should do this project or donate to this fund. And but then the same token, I know they're right. They've got my back. They're there when I need them, and it's been a great experience for all of us, I think.
Love it. Dan, Zachary, Juliann, I love the work that you're doing. I'm excited to come out and check out the cowhide and drink some Cab Franc, and
look forward to have you.
Make that happen for sure. So thank you. And thank you for the kind of the leadership that you're showing in building community. I think it's going to be more and more important. So I'm excited that we got the opportunity to share a little bit about what you're doing. So thank you for being on.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. You have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you later.
You too. Bye-bye now.
All right. Palisade, Colorado wine. It is emerging. I'm fascinated in just emerging markets within any segment of food and beverage. And I think Colorado has a true opportunity, especially Cab Franc. Speaking to winemakers, triple down on Cab Franc, on Riesling, on Viognier. There's an opportunity. There's a white space. They grow really well here. It's so much harder to compete on Cabernet Sauvignon or buttery Chardonnays or Pinot Noirs. There's places in the country, in the world that own that space. So I think there's an opportunity there. Speak restaurant, hospitality, tourism. I think that's one of Juliann's superpowers. Clearly, winemakers, anybody watching this, you really need to be able to speak the language of restaurants, because connecting and getting them excited is a massive unlock to the opportunity to build brand and thereby build sales. Restaurants, again, if you are not on the Colorado wine train, you are missing absolutely an opportunity to celebrate what's happening in the state. There is a lot of good juice out there. And look, there's a lot of bad juice, but there's a lot of bad juice in California and in Bordeaux. So just, get out there and taste as much as possible. And especially, again, Cab Franc. There's very unique Cab Francs, not what you expect from the classics of France or even some from California. So I think there's an opportunity there. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much to Juliann of Vines 79 Wine Bar. Again, Best Served Chilled. This is the channel where we're going to focus on beverage producers and beverage professionals. So brewers, distillers, winemakers. You're going to see people who are behind the stick, so to speak, bartenders who are out there celebrating, these sommeliers, cicerones. We're going to focus on that in this channel. That's all for today. Appreciate you as always. Cheers.